So far in this class, we've had two readings that argue that STEM writing is rhetorical, and that might not sound quite right. A lot of people's ideas about rhetoric come from the fact that politicians of all stripes love to fling around the word rhetoric like it's something dirty. But what exactly is rhetoric? Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask ancient Greek rhetorician Aristotle, rhetoric is the ability in each case to see the available means of persuasion. So, to Aristotle, rhetoric is about persuading people. He spoke and wrote about its use in the ancient Greek agora, which is just a fancy word for big open space where people gathered to conduct business and politics. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of Aristotle's views on rhetoric at the moment, so for now, let's just say that he saw and taught rhetoric as an art to help young politicians persuade large groups of people in their speeches. But contemporary rhetoricians see rhetoric a little differently. We've learned a few things over the last 2.5 millennia, after all. One of the things we've learned is, as Miller says in one of the first things we read this semester, A Humanistic Rationale for Technical Writing, that language is never neutral. It's not a window through which we can clearly see someone's meaning. We can't ever really just open up someone's brain and see what they're thinking, and thinking is a complex process anyway that doesn't always translate into words. So meaning making is actually a collaborative process between reader and writer. And every single word we choose contributes shades of meaning to what we're trying to communicate. But those shades of meaning may be different between the reader and the writer. That's what makes writing so hard. Well, one of the things. So let's get specific. How does this all apply to science writing or STEM writing? Well, let's take our first assignment, the OUR grant project description, as an example. Thinking explicitly about rhetoric will help you get your project started. And even though we've built on Aristotle's definition of rhetoric, using his definition as a starting point can be useful. So if we do think of rhetoric as the ability to see in each case the available means of persuasion, there are two questions that we should ask. One, what do I need to know about the situation in order to communicate effectively? And two, what are the available means of persuasion? Interestingly, both of these questions can be answered with something called the rhetorical triangle. Actually, with two rhetorical triangles. Here's the first rhetorical triangle. It's about the rhetorical situation, and it helps you think through your situation before you write. It reminds us to think about a couple of things. First, our own position as the author, what do we want? Second, the audience, who they are, what do they want, and why they might or might not want the same things you want. And those things will drive what you put into the text. Additionally, this triangle has a circle around it to remind us that there may be surrounding contextual issues that you'll need to think about as well. In terms of the OUR grant project description, you are the text author and you want to do a research project, but you need some money to help you do it. Maybe you need funds to travel or to buy equipment, or if you're in the social sciences working with human participants, you need funds to pay people to participate. Now, the audience is the grant committee. In general, grant committees will vary widely from organization to organization, but I can tell you, because I've served on a committee like this at UWF before, that the OUR grant committee will be made up of an interdisciplinary group of professors at varying levels of tenure. So you might be writing to biologists, psychologists, sociologists, historians, musicians. Really, you could be speaking to people from a variety of fields. Now, if you were writing a grant to, say, the National Institutes of Health, you might think your audience would be narrower, primarily doctors and such, but even there you'll still have a similar issue. You might be writing to cardiologists, ophthalmologists, podiatrists, and a million other specialists within the health field. The point is that your audience will have some common features and common knowledge, but they will not necessarily know all of the same inside details and jargon as your specific field. Regardless, the grant committee wants to give money to some students to help them conduct research, but they want to make sure the money is well spent, so they want to make sure it goes to causes they can easily see are worthy, meaning they'll have a positive impact on the world. So you essentially have to argue your case for why your project is important. Those two things, your goals and your audience's goals, will drive what you put into your text, as will the context that surrounds you. A part of the larger context for this example is that you're at the University of West Florida, which is located in Pensacola, Florida, so projects impacting the local community and ecosystems in that area will likely be highly valued. Okay, so that's the first question. What do you need to know about the situation in order to communicate effectively? Now let's look at the second question. What are the available means of persuasion? For that, we have another handy rhetorical triangle. This one is labeled with the ancient Greek words logos, pathos, and ethos. These are called rhetorical appeals, which you may have encountered in a writing class before, but maybe not. An appeal to logos is an appeal to logic and rationality. Appeals to pathos are appeals to emotion and imagination. Appeals to ethos are appeals to credibility. And while you may think, well, some of those appeals will work in STEM writing and some won't, looking at you, pathos, you'll actually likely see a mix of all three, especially in grant writing. Appeals to logos will help you explain how your project is the logical solution to some kind of problem, or is the most rational way to answer some kind of question. Appeals to ethos will help you seem like a credible researcher, a student that the granting institution can trust to give you their money. And appeals to pathos will help persuade the audience that your cause is important. Let's take an example. Say you want to study something about dunes, some kind of method for sand dune reconstruction. In your grant, you want to explain why the method you're proposing to study makes the most sense for this context. That's the appeal to logos. You'll also want to explain that other scientists seem to think this method is a good one and that you have previous experience with sand dune projects, meaning that you know what you're doing and they can trust you with their money. Those are both appeals to ethos. You'll also want to explain that sand dunes are an important part of the coastal Florida ecosystems and economics. Many plants and animals rely on dunes for their homes, but also coastal communities rely on the dunes' protection from hurricanes and tropical storms. Dunes help protect coastal communities from loss of human life and expensive property loss. Those are appeals to pathos or emotion. People get emotional about losing money. Human lives. One last thing before we go. I've talked about rhetoric in relation to this specific grant project because that's what we're working on in class, but they also apply to other grant projects as well, and to other types of STEM writing. You want to keep these principles in mind and think through how they might apply when you start writing your MRAD paper, for example. Rhetoric has a part to play in that paper too.